So the Eagles just had a really big blow following a disappointing injury update. And based on the latest news from Philly, the roster has had a couple interesting changes already. In this video, I'll get you caught up on the latest depth chart battles, share my 53-man roster projection, and go over multiple trade targets to keep your eyes on. So let's talk about that and everything else around the birds. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? It's kind of crazy to say this, but we made it to the end of training camp, although I know a lot of us that are still waiting on Howie Roseman to potentially make a move.
Well, we're waiting.
Honestly, I don't know if Howie's actually going to pull the trigger on a bigger acquisition. Of course, I'll keep you posted if he does. However, before we get there, let's get you caught up on the most recent roster move. After the Eagles announced they've signed linebacker Chance Campbell and released wide receiver Jihaad Jackson. Now, first off, there were several people reaching out to see if Campbell might play a factor or why we'd add another linebacker. And realistically, this was just to add some depth ahead of the preseason finale to go along with guys like Smile Munden, Dallas Gant, and Lance Dixon. Of course, it's not like Campbell couldn't end up sneaking out of the practice squad because he does have history with linebacker coach Bobby King, since the 25-year-old was a 6th-round pick in 2022 while playing 4 games for King. But unfortunately, he tore his ACL last season and spent the entire year on the IR. Like I say though, Philly has one of the best linebacker rooms in the NFL, which is still kind of crazy to say that, but it feels like a very big uphill battle to even make the practice squad. Although one thing that is clear is what's about to happen with the Eagles' other Campbell. In that being Jihaad Campbell after the rookie got the start in practice for the first time next to Zack Baun throughout camp on Wednesday. Granted, if you're asking hasn't he gotten to rotate next to Baun before, he has, it's just that he didn't start over Jeremiah Trotter Jr. until then. So I think you could say it's official now. All the hype, all the versatility, the insane athleticism, and just how quickly he's been progressing has made quite the impact on his linebacker coach.
He comes in prepared. There'll be stuff that I haven't even thought of or not covered. More like second-year college questions, not freaking 8th grade questions. So that's pretty cool.
So with him being able to play close to the line like Baun did last year, what's the benefit of having 2 guys that have that versatility?
It's good. You can be very, very multiple. You can be versatile with your calls. Make it all not look the same. For a few games, do one thing. Next few games, do another thing. Once we start game planning with Dallas, you'll see it. Yeah. So we haven't really, we're just doing our base stuff right now, but you can get real creative with the grease board pen.
Man, I can't wait for the opener. I mean, if Bobby King, the linebacker coach, is hyping up Jihaad like that, come on. And thankfully, we're less than 2 weeks away to see it. Think about it. Jihaad Campbell next to a guy who's entering the season as the 26th best player in the league according to his peers, which is totally deserving, but also kind of unreal when you consider hardly anyone knew of the Bald Eagle before the season started. Yet not only was Baun a first-team All-Pro and Defensive Player of the Year finalist, but he also allowed the fewest yards per target in coverage last season of all linebackers. And maybe most impressively, was the only player in the NFL to record 10-plus tackles and 2-plus havoc plays in at least 5 games last season. Okay, yeah, if you're asking what the heck is a havoc play, that's basically anything that involved an interception, a forced fumble, pass breakup, tackle for loss, or a sack. The best part is that Bobby King and Vic Fangio feel like, and they've even admitted this in press conferences, that Baun is just barely scratching the surface. I think most of us feel that way. So it's only right to do a giveaway for the captain of the defense. All right, if you want a chance to win this signed Zack Baun rookie card, then all I needed to do is type in Baun in the comments section, where I'm going to select one lucky winner to win the card via the randomized spinner on the next live stream. Reminder, that'll be on Tuesday the 26th because I'm going to be out of town this weekend, so we'll do that spin then. Also giving away 2 Eagles tickets to any game of your choice, so if you haven't already, make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Anyway, speaking of Tuesday, the Eagles will have to get the roster down to 53 guys by then. So I figured I'd get you caught up on all the latest happenings from camp with a little 53-man roster projection. Probably goes without saying with the schedule and everything considered there, but this will be the last one before the cuts are actually made, so feel free, save this one, share it, bookmark it, whatever. Feel free to come back, tell me how wrong I was on Tuesday, but here you go. I will say that the quarterback position feels like a pretty easy decision. Jalen Hurts, Tanner McKee, and rookie Kyle McCord over Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Now, I'll admit, McCord hasn't exactly been setting the world on fire, but he did get reps over DTR in the final practice while hitting a couple receivers with the second-team offense, before, eventually getting pressured by Moro Ojomo and throwing an interception.
Never trusted that guy.
Look, fortunately, we have Tanner McKee at QB2, but yes, he's dealing with a finger injury, doesn't appear to be anything major, should be good to go by week 1. Plus, when it comes to QB1, Jalen Hurts reportedly turned in his strongest practice of the summer with 5 touchdown passes, which is really saying something when you take into account him being without A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jordan Mailata, and Landon Dickerson. Anyway, as for the running backs and fullback, I'm going to say Saquon Barkley, Will Shipley, A.J. Dillon, and Ben Van Sumeren. Of course, it's become pretty evident that Shipley is the clear-cut RB2. For one, due to the usage during practice and frequent runs with the first team, but also just how effective he's been in the passing game. Heck, he's getting option routes from Jalen along with some really good coaching.
Hey, Willie, that's a great route, great catch. Remember not to kind of did what you did in the offseason. Yeah. Get your width.
I was too tight.
Yeah, you were tight.
Okay.
Yeah. I love that. You coaching. I love that.
Good job, guys.
I've been around it for so long.
Yeah, that's for damn sure.
Honestly, you see that clip there, you've heard some other takeaways, but it's no wonder that a lot of beat writers are saying Shipley could have a bigger role than Kenny Gainwell did last year. Also, for Ben Van Sumeren to make the roster, it feels like a lock there too, given the focus of adding a fullback to the game. Plus, when it comes to special teams, there's not a better player on the squad, with several guys calling him a madman.
I come to the right place then.
Just saying, how are the Eagles supposed to bring back a fullback, like owner Jeffrey Lurie said earlier in the offseason, if they don't have a fullback on the roster? Anyway, that gets us to the wide receiver group, and here's where it gets difficult. Because according to Jeff McClain, Johnny Wilson is having surgery on his injured ankle after getting rolled up on by Brett Toth and will be out for the season. And say what you will about Johnny, but that dude's value is underrated, kind of like Ben Van Sumeren. It's like Anthony shared. Johnny played 406 snaps last season on offense and 128 snaps on special teams. Now sure, did he suffer from a case of the drops on occasion? Absolutely. Yet it did seem like he was beginning to hit his stride this preseason, and the blocking was never a question. Now look, you hate to see any injuries like that for anyone, especially season ending. I thought that it was going to be significant for Johnny, maybe IR, but season ending was a little bit more drastic than I thought. Either way, prayers for Johnny, hopefully a speedy recovery. Granted, it doesn't make it much better, yet there could be a silver lining for other wide receivers trying to make the roster. And considering the latest update, I'll still probably take 6 guys. A.J. Brown, whose hamstring should be fine for week 1 by the way, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, and John Mechie. Without question, those 4 are automatic locks, because Howie would not have traded for John Mechie if he was going to end up getting cut. Yet another lock to me has to be Darius Cooper, and then I'll sneak on Ainias Smith as that final 6th guy. By the way, real quick on Cooper, he ran almost exclusively with the ones on Wednesday, caught another touchdown pass from Jalen, and clearly has a strong rapport with QB1. In fact, Brandon Lee Gowton went as far to say that Cooper's been the 3rd best wide receiver at camp. Not that he's going to take Jahan Dotson's role or anything, but he's definitely been better. So it'd be crazy for Philly to leave him off the roster. As always, I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts, so feel free if you disagree, different moves that you see other guys potentially making the spots, let me know in the comments. Also, more on why Cooper makes the roster and potentially even gets more snaps than you might think a little bit later. For now, we'll take 3 tight ends, Dallas Goedert, Grant Calcaterra, and Kylen Granson. It wouldn't totally shock me if it only ended up being 2, but I think Granson has done enough and shown some versatility to warrant a spot. Plus, I'll also say this, losing the blocking of Johnny Wilson probably bodes well to add another big-body pass catcher like a Kylen Granson who can block and, at least have some fill in there. Which finally brings us to the O-line. Now, I'm going to take 10 guys, and obviously the first 5 are easy. Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Tyler Steen, and Lane Johnson. However, the second 5 is where I'm sure we're all going to have quite a bit of discrepancies. So I've thought about this a lot. I'll say Matt Pryor, Kenyon Green, probably surprising, I know. But given the injuries and the fact that Howie traded C.J. Gardner-Johnson for him, I'm just not sure how he'd be ready to cut him just yet. And then I'll also take rookie Drew Kendall, Darian Kennard, and rookie Miles Hinton. Obviously, that leaves out guys like Kendall Lamb, Cameron Williams, as well as Trevor Keegan, but maybe some of them or one of them can make it back to the practice squad. For the record, I'm also leaving off Brett Toth, despite him being a favorite of Stouts in the past. Because like Olivia Reiner reminded, he's been cut from the team before. And as a vested veteran, he doesn't need to clear waivers to sign with the Eagles practice squad. So honestly, the biggest move I'm having trouble with there is Cameron Williams, because I do think he's got some really good potential. It's just that he's raw and you can't keep them all. Like I say, let me know how we're doing with the offense, and let's get to the remaining 26 guys for the defense and a couple special teams. So we start with the trenches. At defensive tackle, I'm taking Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Moro Ojomo, rookie Ty Robinson, and my guy Gabe Hall. Now yes, I'm not hiding it, I'm biased with him having played at my alma mater, but Gabe has 100% taken advantage of the increased reps after Thomas Booker was traded and with Byron Young getting injured. And then on the edge, it seems pretty straightforward for most of the choices there too. Nolan Smith, Jalyx Hunt, Azeez Ojulari, Josh Uche, and Patrick Johnson. Look, Uche and Ojulari started to come on as of late, and then Patrick Johnson just offers too much value when it comes to special teams. Of course, I get the argument again that Johnson now qualifies as eligible for the vested veteran designation, so it's not like practice squad is out of the question. But New York picked him up last year, and I don't know if he'd be too keen on going back to the practice squad. Unfortunately, though, for guys like Obo Okoronkwo, O'Shawn Mathis, and Antoine Powell-Ryland just weren't able to show enough. Although in fairness, because we did a video about him, O'Shawn Mathis probably showed more than those guys that I just mentioned, at least the final three. It's just the position is just too deep at edge. And speaking of that depth, the linebackers are the same way, where we'll take 4 Zack Baun, Jihaad Campbell, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and Smile London. Also, probably not a surprise for those who've been following, but Nakobe Dean will likely start on the PUP list with a chance to return after Week 5. Although, while we have plenty of answers at linebacker, maybe too many, the cornerback spot, as we're all very much aware, has question marks, or at least certainly for cornerback 2. Which is why I have Howie keeping 6 players: Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Adoree Jackson, Jakorian Bennett, Kelee Ringo, and rookie Mac McWilliams. Yes, I know. Sadly for those Eli Ricks fans, that probably means he's on his way out. However, Anthony DiBona had an intriguing idea for some trade potentials that we'll discuss later in this video, so maybe Ricks' value isn't completely dead.
He may yet be of some use to us.
By the way, I'm still holding on to the notion or the idea that Jakorian Bennett could win the starting job. I hear you. I've seen lots of the comments out there. I'm not saying Adoree Jackson is the guy. Maybe he is to start out, but Jakorian Bennett, remember, has been with the team for less than 2 weeks, which is about the same amount of time Drew Mukuba has gotten onto the field at the safety position, as he's now dealing with a hamstring injury. However, the good news is it doesn't sound like he'll be on the IR, so I'm going to start with 4 safeties. And we'll go with Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, Drew Mukuba, and Tristan McCollum. Now, I don't blame you if you take Andre Sam over Tristan McCollum, but having seen McCollum's impact on special teams, really more so combined with Fangio's comments, probably gives me a slight edge to McCollum. And finally, for the specialists, the remaining 3 spots go to Jake Elliott, Braden Mann, and long snapper Charlie Hewlett. So there you go. That's my 53-man roster projection, the final one, barring any injuries or last-second moves, which, probably could happen since I'm releasing this video. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. And again, like I say, prayers for Johnny Wilson, but I would also encourage you to not lose any sleep over it. Which, before I get into some of the reasons why, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Bear Mattress. I thought about this the other day, but it's been over a year and a half since I got the Bear Mattress, and it's honestly been one of the best decisions I've ever made. Now, obviously, a lot's changed over that time, yet the one thing that's remained consistent is my sleep has never been better with Bear's premium fiberglass-free mattress customized to the way I sleep. Of course, don't just take my word for it, because Bear ran a survey on over 300 of their recent customers where 82% saw an improvement in their sleep quality on their new Bear mattress. And right now, they're running a special that's a higher discount than what's offered on site, so either scan the QR code or go to bearmattress.com/Philly special to take advantage of it. Here's what you do. Click on the link or scan the QR code, take Bear's sleep quiz, and it'll remove all the guesswork on what you need. For example, I'm more of a side sleeper who likes a softer mattress, while my wife sleeps on her back and also likes a softer mattress. And based on our results, Bear matched us up with their elite hybrid mattress, so we both got what we wanted. And then after placing the order, they shipped the mattress directly to our front door, where we were easily able to unroll and set up our new one. Also, all of Bear's mattresses are Green Guard Gold certified, Certi Pure US certified, and EcoFlex fiberglass free. And the best part about all this is Bear delivers your mattress right to your front door with free shipping in the US. Look, I understand if it makes you nervous to buy something before you try it. In the past, I'd always gone to a location and physically tested out the mattress. But I gotta say, this one worked. They have a 120-night sleep trial to make sure that you absolutely love it. And they also have a limited lifetime warranty, and they even offer financing options and flexible payment plans. I'm telling you, after over 500 nights of sleeping on my Bear mattress, I love it, the quality is insane, and I think that you would enjoy it too. So again, if you're looking to upgrade your sleep, go to bearmattress.com/Philly special, use my code Philly special, and get up to 40% off your Bear mattress. Oh, also, after you check out, if you do me a quick favor and mention the Philly special show in their post-purchase survey, that would really support the channel. All right, lots on the agenda for the Birds and still some intriguing storylines over the next few days, which is why I caught up with Eagles writer Anthony DiBona to discuss other targets, bubble candidates, and why the loss of Johnny Wilson may not be so difficult to overcome.
It really feels like Darius Cooper is that one guy from camp here. 53-man rosters won't be announced until Tuesday, so there is some time, and who knows, maybe it's a surprise. But it really feels like he has to make the roster.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about, right? Because looking back at it, it's not like he was the first undrafted or the only undrafted wide receiver that they signed. They signed him, Taylor Morin, Giles Jackson, obviously added Ife a day later. So, I mean, he was one of 4 undrafted wide receivers on the roster, but he just kind of separated himself so quickly, right? And it was just, he didn't go to the biggest school out of those 4. It wasn't like he had the fastest 40. He just separated himself on the field with his work ethic. I mean, his personality off the field. Seems like he has a great attitude, and it was kind of funny to hear him talk about being in the huddle for the first time with Jalen Hurts and how starstruck he was. And now it's like heading into that final preseason game, and Brandon Lee Gowton talked about how he wasn't even involved in the developmental period in practice, which is usually, and you mentioned it as well, where the undrafted free agents and those end of roster guys would be partaking in that kind of session, right? And he's just, no, I'm over here with the other guys. I'm over here with Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown. Like, I'm just one of the guys already. And it's kind of crazy to think about, but I'm interested to see if he even plays in this third preseason game, because it seems like he does have a roster spot locked up.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. And we say it all the time, but it's like, if you're getting recognition from, no offense, but if you're getting recognition from Nick Sirianni in a press conference, he's going to list out the entire roster. He'll go down the list of all 90 names. But if you're getting recognition from Jalen Hurts, and you're even getting FaceTime with Jalen Hurts, let alone extra balls after practice and some extra reps, talking on the sidelines, that goes an incredibly long way. And then not to mention, obviously, him being in the first team, getting a lot of those reps. Now, granted, some of the injuries have played a factor, but I think in the long run, there's some positives from that because he is getting the rep. He wouldn't have gotten those opportunities had that not been the case. I mean, we think back to Elijah Cooks. That was the name. Like, that was going to be the guy, I suppose. We're like, oh my gosh, this is one. I remember Zack Baun, shout out to him, from training camp that we attended. There was a tweet almost immediately following that training camp session where he was like, it's official. Elijah Cooks is the next best wide receiver of the roster. He is wide receiver 4. Like, compared to Johnny Wilson and Ainias Smith, everyone else, Elijah Cooks, what you've seen so far, he's been the guy. Now, again, injuries, everything else plays a major factor. But Darius Cooper was able to take advantage of that, the opportunity to get to play more snaps because of that injury. It's kind of cool, ironic, funny, however you want to phrase it, of A.J. Brown being what Darius Cooper says his best player or his favorite player. So it's, like, okay, there's comparisons. He's a mini A.J. Brown, but you finally see it on the field. Those yards after catch, I think the Eagles absolutely love that. We've seen them try to do some things with wide receiver screens, crossing routes across the middle of the field. Kevin Patullo's really loved that. And the sky really is seemingly the limit for a dude, as you just mentioned a second ago, but like never lined up in the huddle to call a play. Like in his college career, it was always like, spread offense and he'll get the play call otherwise, but never in the huddle. So, yeah, he's got a ways to go, but absolutely, you see what he's done so far and you see the potential with this offense. Like, why not? As a number 4 option, 5 option. But the crazy part is, you still have Johnny Wilson, John Mechie. What happens to Ainias Smith, all the others? It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the thing with Darius Cooper that kind of impressed me the most is it's been like a steady incline for him, right? Where he's just been getting better and better. Where Kevin Patullo even mentioned it when he was asked about Darius Cooper. I think it was maybe a week or so ago, and he was like, "When did he first kind of stand out to you?" He was like, "Listen, at rookie minicamp, just the way he's built, the way he was moving, I kind of caught my attention, and now he's kind of just built on it." Kevin Patullo said that AJ Brown kind of took him under his wing, and the fact that, like you mentioned, Cooper kind of looks up and idolizes AJ Brown, that's got to be cool for him too. Like, not only is he working with Jalen Hurts, but now his favorite receiver that he kind of idolizes is taking the time to teach him things. So it's going to be really fun to just watch him moving forward. But it does make things interesting, given Johnny Wilson's injury and things like that, how they're going to kind of finish out that wide receiver group. You never want to see any player get injured, obviously, of course, no matter how much you like a player or dislike a player, you never want to see anybody get hurt because this is their livelihood, this is what their families depend on, things like that. But at the same time, from like the business standpoint of it and just the roster management standpoint, Howie Roseman's going to have a lot of difficult decisions to make. Similar to last year with Ainias Smith, where who knows if he was actually injured or not, that's kind of still debatable, but he was placed on IR at the start of the season. So they were able to kind of stash him and kind of push that decision, push the can down the road a little bit. And you don't have to kind of make a decision where you have to cut one of these other guys for 4 weeks, maybe even beyond that, depending on the severity of his injury. So just looking at the Eagles roster, like before Johnny Wilson's injury, you probably had 7 wide receivers that you would ideally like to keep around. And then you're deciding between Ainias Smith, and then obviously adding John Mechie made that even harder because he's now the 7th guy. So Ainias Smith, it's like, oh, do you want to give up on him after one season, basically? And I know he showed some flashes this year, but still not necessarily like the flashes that you really want to see, where he's going for 80 to 100 yards in a preseason game. But at the same time, it's like, if you expose him to waivers, he was a 4th or 5th round pick. He's probably going to get poached by somebody else. And then now you have to risk that. Injury warrants being placed on IR, then now you can keep those 6 guys without having to cut Ainias Smith or Darius Cooper with, like we mentioned, I think Darius Cooper's a lock at this point, and John Mechie probably is as well. Despite them trading for him just a couple days ago, it feels like they wouldn't have made that pick swap if they didn't like keeping the guy around.
And that'd be the crazy part, because then it's, in effect, it's keeping 7 receivers. Obviously, like you say, the IR makes it where it's more so keeping 6 and then the IR spot. But would not have anticipated that like 3 weeks ago based on where things were headed. It's like, well, maybe 5, if that. Or just see who these guys are and which ones end up making a chance. But Terrace Marshall Jr., that's going to be maybe practice squad. You see where that goes. Same thing for Elijah Cooks, as we mentioned. So there's guys that if they don't get signed elsewhere, hey, great chances potentially for practice squad. You even brought up Avery Williams, who has been a complete afterthought, despite when he was signed. It was like, man, hey, he could be a special teams ace / hybrid offensive weapon. And here we are. We've hardly even mentioned his name all training camp.
Yeah, I gotta put my hand up on that one. I was one of the guys kind of praising Avery Williams and saying that he could be this great returner and now potentially perform at wide receiver once that was kind of officially announced. But we just really haven't even seen him much at wide receiver, and I feel like whenever he has been returning the ball, it just hasn't been that impressive where it kind of sets him apart from everybody else, where you think, wow, this guy can be your return specialist, and that's kind of just what he does. And then he also had a missed tackle on special teams last week against the Browns, so things like that, it doesn't seem like he's going to make the final roster, but I do think he might be an ideal candidate to kind of make the practice squad where if they need a return guy 1 week or if they need him to kind of step up for another receiver, maybe keep him around that way. But he just never really developed offensively like I thought he would.
Speaking of maybe not developing as well as some may have hoped, Kelee Ringo, I think it's official. It seems very evident of what's transpired in his. Not that he still couldn't be a good cornerback at some point, but the competition for this season seems to have passed him by. Third team reps, a couple practices, not getting any first team reps, and then Wednesday shows up with I don't know, quad injury. Apparently, there were no reports of anything during Tuesday's practice, but then Wednesday, oddly enough, he shows up with an injury. And then it's not a surprise, but a lot of people on Twitter, on your social media of choice, is like, okay. What does that mean? What does that mean? Are the Eagles preparing a move for Kelee Ringo? Is he trade bait for someone out there?
I mean, the second I saw multiple reporters that were in attendance say, hey, Kelee Ringo just came out here with no helmet, I thought of like the Brian Windhorst. Like, now, why would they do that? Like, what's going on here?
Yep.
But I mean, because it seemed like he made it through the practice the other day with no issues, right? There weren't any reported, like, he took a fall, he came up limping, like anything like that. And then all of a sudden, literally the last practice of training camp, before we've seen like 3 or 4 trades happen today already, and then who knows, there's going to be more to come, of course. But the fact that he's just steadily dropped down, right? It's like he was with the first team, didn't do too well. Now he was down to the second. The most recent practice before his quad injury, he was with the third team. It's just not looking great. And I compared him before this whole thing started. I said him and Tyler Steen were kind of like copies of each other, right? They were both from the same draft class. They both were competing for starting jobs in the past, never really won the job. They had their chances as like spot like starters or little chances here and there and tried to make the most of them. And now they both were in legitimate competitions and put in position to start. And obviously Tyler Steen beat out Matt Pryor for the starting right guard job. And Kelee Ringo just hasn't been able to do that with Adoree Jackson or Jakorian Bennett or Mac McWilliams, whoever you want to put in there. He just hasn't been able to separate himself. And I know people say, oh, he's only 23. He runs a 4.3. He's 6'2". Like, that stuff is all fun, and that's great to think about. But the Eagles are thinking about competing for a Super Bowl. They can't just have this guy developing on the job and missing the tackle that he did against Jamar Chase. Like, they can't afford those kind of mistakes. And he just hasn't been able to separate himself. And I said it from the start. I thought he was going to win the job. I thought that would be the best case scenario for the Eagles, is for him to win the job, and it just hasn't happened. And I know it sucks to hear, and I know it's not fun to see, but at the same time, it's like, if it's not going to happen this year, when will it happen? So can he potentially be traded? I wouldn't rule it out.
It's when we've seen Howie do some crazier stuff than that, we'll just say that. I mean, even to the element of like, okay, yeah, sure, Kelee Ringo, he's going to make the roster if he's not traded. Some people are like, yeah, but what does this mean for his... He's good enough on special teams. Like, even if it's, hey, he's a backup corner, he's going to be making the roster. So I don't think there's a scare from that side or, concern of that element. But the only other way is if he gets traded, like you say. And so I don't know. It's I wouldn't lean towards the percentages of a more likely trade than not. But at the same time, if you're looking at it and saying, yeah, we've got our guy, it's an Adoree Jackson or a Jakorian Bennett. You could throw in McWilliams, yes, but kind of feels like the two of Adoree Jackson and Jakorian Bennett. I have heard or seen some takeaways. I'm curious your thoughts on this. Because if we remember a year ago, Devin White was not exactly in the same stance, but similar to Adoree Jackson. I think if we were at about this point last year, ready to go into a couple weeks from the Brazil game, it was Zack Baun was going to be one of your starters at linebacker, and the other one was kind of feeling like Devin White. Like Nakobe Dean had not done anything to solidify. If anything, it was like I don't know where he's going to be. Is he going to get starting? Is he going to get the starting position? Is it not Jeremiah Trotter Jr.? Who knows? So lots of questions. And then all of a sudden, it was, Nakobe Dean's job. He took it, ran with it, and Devin White ends up, being gone and not even staying in Philly eventually after the move. So do you see, is it any way in your mind, because some people are, but Adoree Jackson could get Devin White, or is this one different, you think, for Adoree Jackson?
I understand the comparison, but I just think it's a completely different situation. I think Adoree Jackson, I know it's not the prettiest outcome, but I said it before, I think he kind of provides the highest floor of a lot of their options, opposite of Quinyon Mitchell and with Cooper DeJean in the slot. And I feel like with Devin White, it was kind of just like, can Nakobe Dean get up to speed? Almost like the Kelee Ringo situation in a way, where Nakobe Dean obviously was able to get up to speed and take the reins of that job, and Kelee Ringo hasn't been able to do that. So if Kelee Ringo was it was closer and he wasn't sitting out practice and he wasn't with the third team in the most recent practice, I would say, hey, maybe in this next week or so, Kelee Ringo just earns that job. And then they just cut bait with Adoree Jackson and say, hey, listen, do you want to be a backup or you want to get an opportunity somewhere else? And then they just kind of do right by him. But I just don't think it's that situation. We've all kind of seen it play out. Kelee Ringo hasn't been able to separate himself or even really show much flashes as far as what we've seen in preseason. So I just think Adoree Jackson's going to be that starter. And like I said, I don't think it's the end of the world, but it also wouldn't surprise me if you say week 4 or 5 of the season, all of a sudden now Adoree Jackson's the backup and a guy like Jakorian Bennett or Mac McWilliams that they've kind of been working their way on the outside. Now they get a little bit more up to speed, and now they're inserted over Adoree Jackson because they do have that higher ceiling. Maybe Kelee Ringo too, but it just doesn't seem like he's trending in the opposite direction of these other guys where Jakorian Bennett and Mac McWilliams are kind of technically still in the mix. But I think to start the regular season, especially against the caliber of players that they're going to be going against, Adoree Jackson might be the safer, more experienced option.
And then, as we were talking about a second ago, but then to throw in the element of the quad injury, it's like, okay, even if they're not giving up on him, right, air quotes of the quad injury, but even if they're not giving up on him, if it is a legit injury, then, it's like, okay, well, there's another element added to this thing of going, well, when will he be available? He's going to miss more reps now, and they're clearly not certain on it. So, yeah, it's an interesting spot. By the way, if people want to go check this out, Anthony has dropped an article, which is a great article, breakdown of the cornerback 2 position and Adoree Jackson and everything else. Go to thephillyspecialshow.com, or I've got a link in the description. Great work, as always, by the Ant-Man. Just for people not so sure about Adoree Jackson, I don't want to give away everything because they can check out the full breakdown and everything like that, but at least some reasons for optimism. I know you say like a higher floor for Adoree compared to those. Perspective is a beautiful thing, but maybe a little bit more hope than what people, I don't know, like people see or think of Adoree Jackson, and I totally get it too. But I've seen so many comments like, oh, well, there's Adoree Jackson. It's going to be death by a million paper cuts. It's going to be 7 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards, 10 yards. And just keep moving down the field if they want to pick on Adoree Jackson. Maybe not so much.
So there's kind of 2 points that I want to make with this. One, I'll kind of hint at, but I'll leave you have to go read the article to check out fully. But there is one former Eagles cornerback that had a very similar kind of career arc, very similar age profile, very, very similar career stats, up until the point that they both signed with the Eagles. And I'll just leave it at that. One of them ended up being very good, and then obviously Adoree Jackson, people hate on it for some reason, but I think it might be a little bit better than people might realize. And I'm not saying he's going to be a lights-out starter. He's not going to make mistakes. But like I said, I just feel like you just need that steady, kind of higher floor player opposite of Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, where they're not going to give up 150 yards and 80-yard touchdowns and miss a bunch of tackles. You just need that steady presence, and I think he can provide that. And then another thing was, I know against the Bengals, he gave up some passes to Charlie Jones, but he did guard either Jamar Chase or T. Higgins on 8 plays. He only allowed one catch for 12 yards, and that was kind of to Jamar Chase on the sideline, pushed him out of bounds immediately, didn't allow any yards after the catch. T. Higgins was targeted across the middle early in the game. Was it a drop? Was it a PBU? Kind of tough to tell because Adoree Jackson was there, but the ball kind of sailed through T. Higgins' hands, so that didn't really go down on the stat book in general. And then technically, one of those 8 plays was Jamar Chase got a touchdown in the back of the end zone, but it was like a 6-second passing play where the only reason Joe Burrow was even able to make the throw was there was a chop block that was called. So that play was blown dead. So overall, I think he did pretty well against those two guys that are viewed as one of the best, if not the best. I know Eagles fans don't want to hear that, but one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL. And then another thing that I'll also mention in the article, but I'll say it here, is he's only allowed 4 yards after the catch through 2 preseason games. And if you compare that to Kelee Ringo, who has allowed 50 yards after the catch in 2 preseason games, that just kind of tells you the difference of them kind of being able to not only just tackle after the catch, but also before the throw was even made to kind of guide these guys towards the sideline or to just limit or guide them towards help where they know another defender is going to be there, where you can limit the yards after the catch and not necessarily be stuck on that island where if you can't turn with them, we saw that Jamar Chase touchdown against Kelee Ringo. So I do think Adoree Jackson's a little bit better of an option than people might be giving him credit for.
Yeah, we'll take it a little less. A guy with a little less on the yards after catch allowed. It's one thing, and as Fangio said this before too, but it's one thing to allow the catch. That's going to happen. It's another thing to allow the catch and then the missed tackle or the missed attempt, and guy goes for 50 more yards and a touchdown. So, I get the concern. It's understandable. And this will probably be an ongoing topic until, who knows, maybe it's week 1, Adoree Jackson just shuts down George Pickens and, hey, okay, there's our guy. Or if it's Jakorian Bennett, so on and so forth. The defense, and I think that is another thing I have to remind myself of even as well, is the defense this year for the Eagles has an incredibly high ceiling. Like, their potential is insane. But at the same time, it's a new defense. There's some new added pieces, as we all know. And going into the point this year, where we're at now, is, in my opinion, better than we were last year going into this point. I think it's the preconceived idea or the too easy, the recency bias of going, yeah, but last year's defense was number 1 defense. They were, but, I mean, at the bye week portion, we were still kind of going like, I don't know, man, this is, especially coming off the Bucs game, like, this is going to be the same thing as the last season. They're just going to allow over the middle of the field. They're going to play off coverage. It's going to be take what you want and everything else. And then look at how that transpired. So, I'm trying to just kind of remind myself also. It's like, look, even if there's a little bit of growth, if there's some guys that have to be maneuvered in other spots or finally winning out on a position, try not to be so knee-jerk about it because it was the exact same way last season, if not more so. Yeah, and I think the people that, maybe people are just forgetting because they haven't played in the preseason, but just how good Jalen Carter and Moro Ojomo and Zack Baun, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper. And the thing is, last season might have been their floor. They could possibly only get better from that point, which is kind of crazy to think about. And then you're adding in a guy like Jihaad Campbell and then a Drew Mukuba when he's ready, or now Sidney Brown who's healthy and has more experience. Obviously Reed Blankenship as well. So it's just Jihaad Campbell especially. I know he's been talked about a bunch and hyped up a bunch. But I still feel like it's not enough. I honestly feel like a guaranteed Jihaad Campbell segment, every single time that we record, before every game too, the preview of Jihaad Campbell. I'm right there with you. It's just, I feel like that Thursday night opener is just gonna put Jihaad Campbell on the map. I think he's probably gonna end up with. Obviously, we'll go into predictions closer to then, but it wouldn't be surprising me if he had kind of the same game that Zack Baun had against the Packers, right, where it was 2 sacks and he had a bunch of tackles and kind of broke a pass. He could have a performance like that, and people would be like, "Whoa, why did this guy fall again in the draft? What happened?" Yeah. So I'm just really excited to see this defense and kind of just remind people, because me and you obviously are a lot higher on Nolan Smith and Jalyx Hunt than other people were last year, and then now they're both being thrusted into starting roles. So, like I said, I said it a couple weeks ago. I think the ceiling, and you said it as well, the ceiling for this defense, and it sounds crazy to say, but might actually be higher than last year's team. Come on, that's exciting. They're giving work to the offense. Let's just say that. The vast majority of the days, people that are, in the know, keeping up with the recaps and everything, understand this. But the vast majority of the days, it feels like we come on and it's well, guess what? The defense dominated the offense again. Now, the offense has been dealing with some injuries, so there's a lot of that to take into account of, Jalen Hurts doesn't have or didn't have A.J. Brown. Smitty missed some practices. Goddard missed some practices. offensive linemen have missed some practices. And I feel like that might be, you wrote about this, I think, following the Browns game, if I'm not mistaken, and some of the takeaways, but that might be one of the most concerning elements, the backup offensive line or the depth there, because if you have a guy like a Jordan Mailata or like a Lane Johnson that goes out, let's just say Matt Pryor not exactly dispelling those notions of any concern, or I guess any confidence in those guys, and the same thing for Kendall Lamb.
Yeah, it was tough to kind of watch the offensive line last against the Browns, and even in training camp so far, it seems like they really haven't impressed when they've gone against the starters or even the backups, where they're getting beat for allowing sacks or kind of ruining reps. So the fact that you signed Matt Pryor and Kendall Lamb thinking that, hey, Matt Pryor can be our top guard, like Kendall Lamb could be our swing tackle, and they have a ton of experience, like they'll be fine, and they just were out there getting beat by the Browns backups. It's a tough to look. And I know obviously things are completely different, right? If you put Kendall Lamb next to the 4 other starters, things look a lot easier, look a lot better. So it's kind of hard to judge. And same thing with Matt Pryor. If you insert him, I know he's kind of been playing at tackle right now because of injuries, but I think he's better kind of inside at either guard spot. So maybe if you put them in that scenario where it's them and 4 other starters, they look a lot better. But right now, seeing what they did in the preseason and the reports at a training camp, I'm kind of worried that because Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata both did miss games last season. So if they do have to miss time again this year, and it's against one of these teams with a great pass rusher, if it's against the Micah Parsons or even the Giants defensive front now after adding Abdul Carter, like you don't know how these guys are going to react to players like that. So it's going to be a little bit scary. I wrote about it that somebody asked me in my mailbag what my biggest fear was, and I said right now if Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata were to go down, that would be my biggest fear, because I know Fred Johnson wasn't a perfect player, but he kind of stepped in and he was capable, whereas Kendall Lamb just looked completely lost at times. And given how much experience he has, I feel like you would expect more from him. Maybe he gets better with time. Maybe once he's in with the other starters, like I said, he'll look perfectly fine. But right now, I'm a little bit scared.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Let's just say this, not that they haven't have a little bit of potential, but making Julian Okwara and KJ Henry look like potential Pro Bowlers was not the greatest feel. I know the quarterback play also was not good, so we could say it to you. It just compounded all the errors because you had Kyle McCord and DTR that were not doing great, but it was like almost every single snap. You're seeing 1,001. Oh, there they are. They're already at the quarterback. Great. There's hardly any blocking to be had there.
I think my favorite part about that whole situation was people were like, why did the Eagles let go of those guys again? I'm like, all right, relax.
That's the take.
Calm down. Yeah, it was just, that was crazy.
It is, yes. But the takeaway should be, right, because we say this, and when all of a sudden someone's like, hey, Josh Uche's been getting a lot of sacks with the second team, and Azeez Ojulari, it took him a while, but Azeez Ojulari began to get some of those. Okay, that's good. We're not going to take anything away from them, but now you see a little bit of, okay, well, if they're going up against that caliber of tackle, then okay, there's a reason that Julian Okwara did not stick around with Philly. And the same thing for KJ Henry. So, but yes, it's always the recency bias. And whenever you see guys proving to something, then it's like, well, and maybe so. Maybe we should have held on to the guy, or we should get that guy. I am curious, and that also is maybe a good point for the next question or topic as far as some potential trade candidates, because it's super close. It's not too late, but it feels like, man, if Howie's going to make a move, it would have to be in the next couple days just to give a little bit of time to acclimate before the start of the season. And of course, with the 53-man roster lockdown and figuring out what the roster is going to be, not that he couldn't afterwards, but just give a little extra time. Any idea for some trade candidates, guys on the roster that maybe would make sense for Howie to go after? And then I guess I have a reverse for that later with maybe the Eagles and guys they could trade. But to start out with, any names that you like out there as far as they should have on the radar, just keep an eye out.
So with the Eagles and especially Howie Roseman in late August, right, it feels like he's already made 2 deals where both of them were guys on their rookie contract. So he kind of has a type, and he's done that for the last 4 or 5 years straight, literally in August, trading 4 players on their rookie contract. So that's kind of what I would focus on right away, just as like an archetype to kind of focus on. And then so guys that fall into that category at like relatively positions of need. So I'm thinking like edge or offensive line, right? So on the edge, just because they might depth if they're not super excited with Obo Okoronkwo or Antoine Powell-Ryland, that's like that 5th or 6th guy. So Arnold Ebiketie is a guy on the Falcons who they hosted on a top 30 visit. He's kind of been trending upward, but now they did add 2 edge rushers. So who knows if they would want to get value from him before the season and kind of let the younger guys play. David Ajabo is a guy in the Ravens who obviously had an injury coming out of college. Hasn't really been the player that maybe some people thought he would be, but that kind of seems like the player that Howie Roseman would love to target, right? The guy that kind of was drafted relatively high or had a high kind of college career and then hasn't produced as we thought he would in the NFL. And Howie Roseman was like, give me that guy. I'll give you a 6th-round pick for him and see what I can do. And then D'Angelo Malone, also on the Falcons, another edge rusher who the Eagles hosted on a top 30 visit. Hasn't had the same success that Abakite has, but could also be a target, like I said, a guy that hasn't performed necessarily to where he was drafted, but Howie Roseman might be like, hey, okay, let's give that guy a shot here in our culture, maybe we can turn things around. And then flipping over to the offensive line, a guy that probably Eagles fans are familiar with, Evan Neal from the Giants. And I know this is going to be like, what? Why would they take a chance on him? But like I said, highly drafted player, fell on his face in New York, might not even start, but Howie Roseman might say, hey, let Jeff Stoughton get his hands on him, see what we can do. And then old friend Fred Johnson, who the Eagles didn't bring back this offseason in free agency. He's not expected to start for the Jaguars. So if you can just say, hey, listen, we've kind of screwed up. Kendall Lamb's not looking like we thought he would. We'll give you a 6th or 7th round pick. And Jacksonville is saying, hey, you know what, we can have just somebody else. We're not going to be a Super Bowl contender anyway. Let's just get value for this guy. It's going to be more than what we get as a compensatory pick if he walks next year or whatever the case might be. So let's just kind of give him back to Philly and get some value there. So those are kind of be the guys that I would look for as far as who Philadelphia could trade for.
I would not mind that type of reunion. I know that people have mentioned Isaiah Rodgers. That's sure it'd be a great. If you could go back in time, seeing what we see now, if Isaiah Rodgers was here as the cornerback too, we'd have a little bit less anxiety. But that's a decision that I feel like he's already made. I don't think that Minnesota either would be. Oh sure, let's trade you this guy back. You're right. It doesn't feel near as likely for that one. I am surprised though that you didn't say Anthony Richardson. I figured that one would be on your radar there. Trade.
I mean, now that you said that, I'm mad that I didn't list him because you won't find a bigger Anthony Richardson guy than me.
I knew that, but also because of the idea of Shane Steichen and the craziness that they're doing over there. But sure.
I just think that he's been completely mishandled, and I tweeted about this. I received a lot of replies on that. I feel like some people were very upset by it for some reason, but a lot of people liked it as well. So it seems like there's kind of a 50-50 split out there as far as Anthony Richardson, the player. Is he actually good? Has he just always been bad? Does he have any potential? To me, it's just like you bring him here to Philadelphia as the 3rd quarterback in this situation over Kyle McCord or Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I just feel like you let him sit for a little bit, just the raw talent that he has, right? I feel like at least just give him a chance to develop and then see what happens. Obviously, Indianapolis hasn't really handled him the best, and there's obviously debates there, but I would totally be in for that if there was just a chance to kind of trade for him. But I do think a team like New Orleans or somewhere else that might need a quarterback, a little bit like either a backup quarterback or potentially even a starter, I feel like would kind of go for Anthony Richardson if he did become available. The Eagles going for him would kind of be like a luxury move, but at the same time, I would love that. And it seems like kind of a Howie Roseman thing, because even when he traded for Gardner Minshew, it was kind of a similar thing where he was a starter, kind of lost out on the job, and then became available. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Now you got me fired up, man.
Well, I can tell, but that's good though. But honestly, we're gonna lose out to New Orleans any day of the week because more than likely they'll give away 4 first-round picks for Anthony Richardson, and that'll be that. So if they're gonna give away a 4th-round pick and a 7th-round pick for a former 7th-round receiver from Denver, but this is not a New Orleans.
That was a very Howie Roseman-esque move by the Broncos. So very impressive.
I don't know what that was. Yeah, we're going to move on. But yeah, speaking of trade, some teams can be fleeced. Is there anybody that the Eagles could trade New Orleans? Maybe that we're on that topic, or other teams, I guess. But New Orleans, because if they're going to give away that many picks for a guy that was a former 7th-round pick a year ago, I mean, why not? It doesn't hurt to call. But anybody that you think maybe a surplus that they have?
So right after that trade happened that we talked about with the Broncos and the Saints, I said, hey, Howie Roseman got to call up the Saints and see if he can get a 1st-round pick for Ainias Smith. But in all seriousness, I do think Ainias Smith might be a potential trade candidate, right? Because he was a day 3 pick just last year, and other teams probably were eyeing him, and the injury played into maybe he would have been drafted higher. Who knows? So if they don't keep 6 wide receivers, they only keep 5 guys. I'm sure they would be calling around for Ainias Smith before just exposing him to waivers, right? Another guy that kind of fits that, I know he was undrafted, but Eli Ricks would make sense as a potential like, trade candidate where it's like kind of like the John Mechie, Harrison Bryant trade where it's like, hey, I'm probably going to cut this guy. You're probably going to cut that guy. So let's just swap and see what they can do on our team before they go to waivers. And Zack Baun actually pointed this out where the Eagles are dead last in the waiver order, right? So if they are thinking that, hey, this team might cut this guy and they think they're probably not going to have a chance to claim him because they're so far down the line. So that's why you saw them do like the Albert O trade where they just traded for him before he even hit waivers. So that's something else to kind of contemplate too as far as the Eagles trading for players. But other guys that they could potentially trade away, I said Ainias Smith, I said Eli Ricks. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I know he didn't have the greatest showing against the Browns, but it looks like he's not going to be sticking around in Philadelphia. Kyle McCord seems to have locked up that quarterback 3 job. But he hasn't been exposed to waivers yet. He hasn't been available to the entire NFL just yet. So maybe given the quarterback picture around the NFL, I mean, a team like the Jets just lost Tyrod Taylor for a while. Like, who knows if they would say, hey, I'll give you a 7th round pick. Because at that point, if you're going to waive the player, you would literally take anything in a trade for him, right? So that he's a potential – quarterbacks always have, like, a weird amount of value that you never really expect. And then the last guy, and I feel like now we have to talk about it. Will it probably happen? Probably not. But Kelee Ringo, right? I mean, the fact that he's just fallen so far down the depth chart and maybe another team saw him and said, hey, you know what? Maybe we can do something with that. Like, we think in this scheme, he'll fit here better than he would in Philadelphia. But I know breaking up the Georgia guys and seeing him go would be tough to see and him kind of not reaching his potential here. But at the same time, before he gets even further buried down the depth chart and really doesn't have like a role, maybe they kind of maximize him playing a little bit more in preseason and kind of saying, hey, look, he was competing for a starting job. Maybe he can start for a team like the Bengals or something like that. I don't know, because there are some really crappy secondaries around the league. So, like I said, I don't think it happens because we talked about how valuable he is on special teams and just as a potential backup. But, I mean, if the team calls and says, hey, we'll give you a 4th or a 5th round pick, I don't know if Howie Roseman would turn that down.
I mean, I definitely have to consider that, especially for all the reasons that you're talking about. But yeah, fourth round pick, even with all the selections that they have, because, you know, some people are like, do they really need any more? You get 13 selections. Why would they need any more? But we've seen too many times. You give Howie that type of ammunition, even if it's long-term play. You go into next season or next year with the draft, who knows? He's trading up all the acquisition time, able to get to the rookies. So I wouldn't mind it. Be a possibility. Other thing here, real quick, because people curious as far as bubble candidates, things like that, making the 53-man roster, preseason game, and kind of your last chance to make noise. We've kind of addressed a few guys, but couple other, maybe if we haven't mentioned them, or a little bit more on 2 to 3 guys maybe of who can potentially help their chances. Do they even have a shot to make the roster, or just guys to keep an eye on?
So Eli Ricks, I already mentioned, it just comes down to the numbers game. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to kind of sneak through at this point because he really barely played in their last preseason game, and then that's not a good look if you're not getting the game until that late, and then practice, you're just in 3rd team. So looking a little shaky for him, but if he does have a huge performance, you never know. And then I'm interested to see the kind of that last safety spot battle. If they only keep 4 safeties between Tristan McCollum and Andre Sam, both guys have kind of shown flashes at times this year, and obviously McCollum was kind of more of a contributor than we expected last season. So if they do have to keep just one of those guys, it would be interesting to see kind of which one wins that battle. And then, I mean, that offensive line, like we talked about already, and Kendall Lamb, Matt Pryor, even the young guys, Trevor Keegan, Miles Hinton, Cameron Williams, those guys are kind of battling for roster spots at this point where we thought they were all locks. But at this point, I mean, they haven't really, none of them have really shown out where like they think like this guy's absolutely a lock. And when you come to that final roster, Howie Roseman can always do like tricks where it's like, hey, this guy's got so many, he's a vested veteran, he's not going to be exposed to waivers. We can just outright cut him and then just agree like under the table, like, hey, we'll bring you back on the practice squad or to the 53-man roster after week 1. There's all these different mechanisms that you have to kind of take into account. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of these veterans that we think are going to make the final roster get initially cut to kind of sneak through the younger guys and then brought back later on. So, but yeah, that offensive line battle is going to be fun to watch regarding who actually does play, because it is the 3rd preseason game, because that would reveal if somebody is to a lock to make the final roster or not. And then who is out there, how do they look?
You should be following, if you're not already, but you should be, at DiBona NFL. And you got the greatest breakdowns, everything on the Eagles, keeping you up to date. things that you didn't even know existed out there that he's sharing, tweeting, retweeting. And there's also a link down in the description, too, for the latest article. So go check that out. Appreciate you guys. Drop a like if you haven't. Subscribe. And let us know your thoughts as well. Who are you keeping an eye on? Areas for the birds, trade candidates, everything else. As always, we'll see you next time. Go Birds.